Hey everybody, this is Jeremy Tears from Tutor Collegiate Strategies, and you're about to check out the latest episode of the Mission Admissions Podcast, a show that's designed to help higher ed become better recruiters, communicators, marketers, and managers. Each week, I'll introduce you to an industry leader or difference maker who will share helpful advice, tips, and strategies that will help you grow professionally and personally. Mission Admissions is part of the Enrollify podcast network and is made possible by Gecko, an engagement platform that makes it easy for your team to deliver a better student experience. I'm excited to share my latest candid conversation, so let's get started. Hey everybody, it's Jeremy Tears, and this is episode 5 of the Mission Admissions podcast. And while all of my guests have been leaders and difference makers from outside of higher ed, there are some very talented and successful admissions, marketing, and enrollment management professionals who I've gotten to know very well that I want to introduce you to. And that starts today with my good friend Megan Tyler. Megan is the Director of Admission at Wofford College, a role that she's been in since 2020. Megan first joined the college's admission staff as a counselor back in 2015. And after serving in multiple roles, including running their scholars program and being the liaison for new first-year students, Megan became the Senior Associate Director, and she's been instrumental in helping grow applications year after year. And the good news is, as Megan and I were just talking about before we jumped on here, Wofford has already hit their enrollment goal number this year, which, as many of you listening know, is a huge relief. But as Megan and I were talking about, the work is never done. So welcome to the show, Megan.
Thank you so much for having me, Jeremy. I'm excited to be here.
So it's been really fun for me to kind of have a behind the scenes look, if you will, at your career trajectory, because we've known each other now for, I feel like, 5 or 6 years. Before I kind of dive into some of that, because I definitely would love to hear your thoughts and just some things. What did you want to be when you grew up?
I had no idea, honestly. I was the kid that grew up changing my mind pretty frequently about what I wanted to do. I think that in hindsight, looking back on all of the careers that I sort of flirted with, everything from being a teacher, being a doctor, being a nurse, a lot of the commonality between all of those different professions is that ultimately I think I really just wanted to help people. And so like lots of people, I didn't grow up wanting to be in admission or thinking that it was even a possibility. It's something that I kind of stumbled into, but I feel incredibly lucky and fortunate that I did, because quickly early on in my start in higher ed, I realized that this is really what I was supposed to be doing with my life. And so I feel fortunate to have figured that out so early on, for sure.
How did you realize that? Think back, was there a day, was there a moment? How did you realize it?
Yeah, so in college, in my junior year, I attended a seminar given by someone here at the school where we talked a lot about careers, figuring out your path, what you wanted to do with your life. And the speaker had all of the people in the session do an exercise at the very end. He asked us all to write down the 3 qualities that we wanted out of our career. It couldn't be, I want to be a fill in the blank. It had to be, I want these qualities in my particular profession. And so I spent a lot of time sort of thinking about that, and probably like most students in the room at the time, one of the things that I wrote down is that I wanted to make enough money to support myself. The second thing is that I wanted to be happy in what I was doing. I wanted to wake up every day excited to go to work. And the third thing is that I wanted to feel like I was making a positive impact and adding some kind of value in the world. And so as I started applying for jobs in my senior year of college, I sort of used that note card as a guideline of, do I think these professions are going to help me achieve these 3 things that I've written down? And I started in osteopathic medical school admission, and really liked what I was doing there. I liked the people that I was working with. But after about a year doing recruitment for them, I felt like there was something missing. And I think the biggest piece of that was really that I didn't feel like I was adding a whole lot of value. Lots of the students that I was working with already had a very set life plan. They knew what they wanted to do. They had all the answers. And I didn't feel like there was much of a difference that I was really making in that process. And so when the job opened up at Wofford for me to come back here, I felt like this might be a really good opportunity to kind of check that third thing off the list, right? To find meaning and value, and that I'm doing something that is meaningful in the world. And probably by my first 4 weeks here, within my first 4 weeks here, I knew that this is what I was supposed to be doing. It happened on a Saturday afternoon. I was doing an information session, and a student stayed behind after her tour. She's a first-generation student, and she had lots of questions about the college process, about applying, about financial aid. And so I sat down with her for a long time and kind of talked through all these different things that she needed to know, and told her, look, here's my number. Contact me throughout your senior year. Whether you end up at Wofford or not is irrelevant. I want to make sure that you end up in college somewhere. And so we worked together throughout that whole year. And she did end up enrolling at Wofford, has since graduated, doing very well in life. But that was one of those sort of moments where I felt like it clicked, right? Of this is it, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And it gave me an internal peace, which I am generally a pretty anxious person, so I don't experience that often in life. But it gave me an internal peace of, okay, here's where you need to focus your time and attention. This is sort of the path for you.
I think fulfillment, right, is super important. And I know over the years, you and I have talked a lot about that, I feel like, in our conversations. And, you know, I always talk with people about, are you happy, right? And it doesn't mean you don't have stressful days, to your point. It doesn't mean you don't make mistakes. But do you feel like you have some connection to your career that is allowing you to achieve some level of happiness and fulfillment, right? And I think that's just super important for anybody in any career. What about working for your alma mater? I mean, you've done it now for a handful of years, and I have no doubt there's a lot of people listening to this. I got to believe there's pros and cons. So what are some of the, you know, I'll go in whatever order you want, pros or cons about working at your alma mater?
We'll start with the cons so we can leave it with the pros. But I think one of the biggest challenges that I faced coming to work here as a staff member is really learning, kind of for lack of a better term, how the sausage is made, and seeing a different side of things that I didn't see as a student. This generally is, I think, a very magical place, as most colleges are, where students, when you're there as a student, it feels like everyone's here to support my dreams and my ambitions and help me find my place in the world. And it can be a very transformative experience, I think, for someone's life. College in general can be. And so I think that when you shift from a role of attending a school where all of these things are working for you, the student, into a role of a staff member or any kind of role where you're then that person supporting students that are here, you start to see things that maybe take a little bit of the magic away that you might have perceived as a student. And so that, I think, can be a challenge. But I think that ultimately for me, all of the pros far outweigh any of that. And honestly, the biggest one really is this is a place for me that as a student, I grew so much, learned so much, and it really, I fully believe, changed my life and the trajectory of my life. And to be able to feel like you have an opportunity to sort of facilitate that process for other people is a way of, I think, paying forward a lot of the kindness and generosity that I was shown as a student here that I can never repay fully, right? It's just one of those things that you kind of have to pay forward. And so to be able to do that at a place that I believe in, where I align very much with the college's core values and mission, that I think is a really special thing.
Yeah, and you do it for a couple of years, right? When you started as a counselor, I gotta believe there came a point in time, and I don't know if you can think back and remember, I'd love to hear it if you can. When did the day or when did the moment happen where you said, okay, not only am I enjoying this a lot, not only do I feel like I'm making a difference, but ultimately I think I want to be a leader in this profession. Do you remember when that kind of happened or clicked for you?
Yeah, I don't remember the moment, but I can tell you it was a shift in my mindset overall. So early on, when I was really sort of focused on the basics of the career and learning what I needed to do my job effectively as a counselor and as a recruiter, I was very focused on my territory, my goals, my applications, my students. And at some point, that language internally for me shifted from my territory and my goals to our goals. Like how does my work fit into a much larger sort of mission? And I cared. It's not that I didn't care about what my personal goals might have been in terms of my recruitment territory, but I cared much more so about us meeting our overall goals than I ever did about me meeting my personal goals for recruitment. And so when that shift kind of happened for me, I thought this might be time for me to start thinking about other opportunities that allow me to continue to grow into roles where it is your job to think more strategically about the overall goals of the college and what you're trying to accomplish.
Was that a hard shift for you when that shift took place?
It was different. And I think as I've moved up in various positions here at Wofford, what I've realized that at times it can take you further and further away from individual students. And at first, I think I struggled with that a little bit because of, the example that I gave earlier. I have lots of really meaningful relationships with people that I've recruited over the years. And so when it starts to feel like you're shifting a little bit away from that and you're focused on a bigger picture, you don't get that personal interaction as much. And so initially that was, I think, a little bit of a challenge for me. But how I've tried to frame it and how I try to see it now is that early on, I felt like I was more so impacting a handful of students, able to work with a handful of students really closely and kind of guide them through the process. And now I feel my goal is much more broad, right? Where I'm trying to think of strategy and sort of best practices that help all of our students. And so it's a shift in thinking and something that I do think was a little bit of an adjustment early on for sure. But once you sort of see the benefits of looking at things from a larger perspective and focusing on the policy, the strategy, and you see those sort of decisions that you've made pay off in bigger ways, I think it kind of helps sort of mitigate that feeling of uneasiness a little bit.
I don't think I've met a single higher ed professional that loved everything about their technology stack. Here's the honest truth. No CRM or SIS will be able to meet all of the needs of all of your team. And that's why I'm a huge fan of Gecko, a student engagement platform that offers customizable modules designed to complement your institution's CRM and SIS. Gecko offers plug-and-play modules that enable your team to deliver memorable student experiences at scale. Their chatbot and texting tools will empower your admissions team to engage with the highest quality prospects by serving as a front line of defense for prospects that have basic questions about the college admissions process. Gecko's event module makes it easy to create awesome online and in-person event experiences one time and then duplicate them throughout the year with just a couple of clicks. Their call center is also an industry leader. No more splitting call lists into a dozen Excel files, scrolling through data to find who you need to call next, or having to manually record who picked up and who didn't. Oh, and did I mention that everything integrates seamlessly into your CRM and SIS? Because it does. So if you're a Slate school, for example, you'll see all of that sweet interaction data in your student's timeline. If you want to level up how you engage with prospective students, but you don't want to disrupt your processes, rip out all your tech, or start a new CRM procurement process, you need to check Gecko out. You can learn more about their offerings at geckoengage.com/Enrollify. And be sure to tell them that Jeremy and the Enrollify team sent you their way. And it is a hard shift, I would argue, for a lot of people. You know, I was sharing with you that I was just at lunch before we jumped on here with a good friend of mine who's the president of a company, and we were just talking about hiring practices and going again from, if you want to call it, a junior level to a senior level and leadership. And it is hard, especially sometimes in a profession like higher ed, where you are front facing with students and families, to say, well, if I really enjoy that and that's part of what gives me happiness and fulfillment, am I going to lose that, right, if I go to the leadership level? And I love how you framed it, because to me, I would argue you go from impacting a handful of people in your territory as a counselor to now impacting the entire group, because you're impacting each one of the staff members that you manage, who then manages, obviously, to impact, hopefully, all of those students and families. And then the strategy part you talked about, you get to manage some of that as well, which allows for additional growth. When you took over as director, so you figured out this is what you wanted to do, you came into a situation that I would argue probably is less common than most, meaning it wasn't like Wofford was down in the dumps and we're coming off a bunch of terrible years of declining enrollment. Wofford was coming off a record-setting year, and I gotta believe, but I want to hear it from you, a little nerve-wracking or still exciting? I mean, help me kind of think back to those first few days. How did you feel?
Very excited. I'll say I felt fortunate to step into the role when I did, when we consider where we were with enrollment, but that was also in the middle of the pandemic. Things had really just sort of kicked off there, and so I knew that there were going to be lots of challenges that I really had no idea how to prepare for in advance. And I would probably argue that I think most people in higher ed felt the same way, that it was a time of a lot of flexibility, and being sort of open-minded about the way that we do things. And so I was excited for the opportunity to really build my own team and invest in the people that I'd worked with for a while, and then welcoming new people onto the team as well. I was excited for that opportunity. I was nervous, though, just given the situation that we were in and how COVID and the pandemic might change our recruitment plans, our strategy, our communication, all of that. And so that was certainly a little bit of a challenge.
I gotta believe part of, correct me if I'm wrong, what probably got you through all of that was not only obviously the support of senior leadership around you, but I have to believe there were other things, and this is what I would love to have you share, that you were doing on a day-to-day basis that just helped you realize, okay, some days it's baby steps, some days it's bigger steps, but like we're moving forward and not backwards. So talk to us about that.
Right. I think that for a long time, I have tried to focus more internally on a commitment to a process versus commitment to particular goals. And so what I mean by that is my own personal process kind of leading up to this point has been to think about whatever it is that I'm trying to accomplish, to think about that from a standpoint of intelligent planning, having a relentless work ethic to get the job done, and mixing all of that with this genuine desire to add value. And for me, those three things sort of are my process. Those are the things that I think have helped me get to the position that I'm in now. And I think oftentimes it's easy for sometimes people to not see a lot of that, right? Like that hard work and the behind the scenes stuff isn't stuff that lots of people just know about or they see on a regular basis. And so oftentimes I do think that people can perceive I would argue, I think my trajectory has been pretty rapid. And I think that sometimes people can view that as it just sort of happened overnight. But for me personally, it's been a commitment to those three things of committing to the process of making sure that whatever it is I'm doing, I'm planning those things appropriately, that I'm thinking about all that goes into that, which is the data, the strategy, all of that. and that I'm committed to the work at the end of the day. And I think that ultimately that desire to want to add value brings a lot to the table. It's hard to do meaningful work if you don't have sort of the why settled in your heart as to sort of why you want to do it.
Were you committed to the process as a college student, or is that something you developed in your professional career?
Yeah, I think I've always sort of been of that mindset for a really long time. As a kid, even I didn't know that that's what it was, but that's certainly what I was doing. College taught me how to do that in a more rapid environment and balancing lots of things at once. But when I find something that I'm really passionate about, for me in particular, the sort of basics of whatever that thing might be, while they're not always the most fun, to practice or to learn or to hone those skills, I think there is a certain level of attraction to it, because you know that mastering these different things is what's ultimately going to make you better overall, right? And so I think I've always sort of had that understanding, and I don't exactly know where it came from, but I think it's kind of always been there.
Yeah. I always wonder that, I think we're all blessed with things we're good at. And I tell people all the time, there are a lot of things we all suck at, right?
Yeah, for sure.
For me, and I've said this on the podcast before, it's just not hard to do conversations like this or to stand in front of a room of 500 people and talk. I don't know why. And I wonder, is it a DNA thing where we somehow get that from our parents or, what have you. But I think to your point, right, you develop a process or you develop certain skills, I'm sure at a young age, or even when you get to high school or college, that if you repeatedly do them and commit to them over and over, right, allows you in any career, let alone higher ed, to probably have a faster trajectory, I would argue, to, if that's what a goal of yours is, being, for example, in a position of leadership like you are. Think back to your first 30 days or so as a new director, right? So obviously it's about 2 years ago. What do you know now that if you could go back and kind of have a do-over, if we want to call it that, anything that just pops that I never would have done like that, or I would have done this completely differently in those first 30 days now that I know what I know?
I think that for myself, what I would like to tell myself now is that I should have been a little bit more patient with me. I'm one of those people that when I step into a role or into a responsibility or whatever it may be, I want to do it well from the very beginning. And I don't often love the period of growing pains where you try things and you learn maybe not so much that way. We need to pivot a little here. And so I think that ultimately I should have been a little bit more patient with myself. I will say that the one good thing that I did is that I talked to some people in the field before I stepped fully into that role and got their thoughts and opinions on what I should and shouldn't be doing in that first stretch. And that I got sort of two pieces of advice from different people that I very much trust. And one of them was to create a set of core values with our team as an activity to do together. So I didn't create our core values, our team created those core values, and that was a very, I think, transformative sort of exercise for our office to do together. We had lots of really honest discussions. There was a lot that sort of came out of that conversation that helped us grow as a team and move forward together, and then having individual meetings with every single person on the staff in that first week, 2 weeks that I was director. Those are the two things I did right. I think everything, and that's not to my credit at all. That is to the credit of the people that I've relied on professionally to kind of help guide me and know what those steps might be. But in terms of myself, definitely being a little bit more patient with sort of that process initially.
Patience is hard, right? For a lot of people. Going off that, when you get impatient, how do you handle stress? How do you handle, you just called them growing pains. Have you figured out anything over 5, 7, 9 years, that has really been helpful for you in terms of dealing with those things?
I try to look at when things happen or things come up, I try to look at it from a perspective of, is this something that I can change? Am I stressed out about this because it's within my control to change it? And if the answer is no, which it often is, then the sort of response from me becomes, okay, I need to give myself however long to be frustrated about this, to be upset about this, and then when that 10 minutes is up or that 15 minutes is up, we're dropping it and we're moving on, kind of thing. I think that when I'm stressed or anxious about something that I do have the ability to control or at least influence the outcome, I try very hard not to project that onto the team, right? I try to keep that very separate because I don't think that that's helpful for other people to know I'm anxious and I'm stressed, because oftentimes that sort of energy is mirrored back to you, right? And I don't want them to be anxious and stressed. So trying to find outlets outside of work professionally, things that don't have to do with the job, has been helpful for me. And then obviously having really close friendships with people outside of the office that I can talk to about kind of what's going on is always a good thing, when you can just vent to some people and have some kind friends that will listen and then set you back on the right path.
Hey y'all, Zach here from Enrollify. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, admissions, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks that are all designed to empower you to become a better higher ed professional. Our shows feature a selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Mickey Baines, Jeremy Tears, Jaime Hunt, Corynn Myers, Jaime Gleason, and many, many more. You can learn more about the Enrollify Podcast Network at podcasts.enrollify.org. Our shows help higher ed marketers and admissions professionals find their next big idea. Find yours at podcasts.enrollify.org.
I feel like venting is something we all need to do, right, throughout our careers, and no question, having people you can vent to, whether it's a sibling, a parent, a spouse, a good friend, a mentor, whatever it is. I'm curious if you're willing to share, do we have a happy place then, if we want to call it that we go to when we're stressed, or okay, I'm going to go home and do this tonight, that just, to your point, allows you to decompress a little bit and kind of refocus, recharge, whatever the right, verbiage might be?
If I'm at home, the place is in my yard. I love to do all of the yard work myself. I love to spend time outside, just in general. Also have a dog, and we spend a lot of time outside together. That's the go-to place if I'm here. If I have the ability to travel, if we're talking about a vacation or something like that, anywhere where there's water and sand is a place where I often feel very peaceful. It's something about being able to see how small you really are in this world is a great reminder of things aren't always as chaotic and stressful as they might seem. And the beach of anywhere, any kind, is the place that always reminds me of that.
Yeah, you and I are very similar, as you know, in that regard. And, we take a family vacation every fall to the exact same beach, yep, in the exact same spot. And to your point, just being able to lie, sit, whatever you're doing on a beach for, no joke, 6-7 hours, mm-hmm, and just look out, listen to the water, feel relaxed. To me, right, whatever your happy place is, if you're listening to this, I would argue it's extremely important, like Megan just talked about, to, when you get stressed, when you have growing pains, find something that makes you happy and allows you to kind of detach from that world. I want to go back to leadership. You talked a little bit about, I'll call it, not holding back from your team, but kind of, not introducing them to that same type of stress, obviously, that you feel. When you started in leadership, talk to us about just how you developed your leadership style, and if you had to define it, what kind of leader do you think you are?
Well, Jeremy, I don't love labels, but if I had to try to describe it, I think what I would say is probably more of a coach-player type of situation is what I would probably identify with most. I think for me, the things that I try to do, and I hope that my team would say this, I want to empower the people that are on the team to do the jobs that they have well. I want them to feel, counselors that are recruiting, that they are territory managers, right? That they're deciding, where am I visiting, where am I recruiting, what are the priorities here based on the data and the overall goals of our college. So I want to empower them to be those leaders in the office. I want to encourage them because we all need a little bit of that. And then I want to help them enhance sort of their skill sets, whatever that might be. And I think that's the great thing about a team is people are very good at lots of different things, and you don't have to be great at everything. You can be great at the things you're good at and rely on the other people to be great at the things they're great at, and that makes the whole team function so much more effectively. And so that's probably how I would describe it if I was forced to pin down a label.
Well, I ask that because I get a lot of new directors or VPs or even associate directors or assistant directors who now are in a position of, all right, I still may have a territory, but now I'm also managing one or multiple staff members. And it's, you talked about one-on-one meetings earlier when you first started at the leadership level, and all of what you just shared there now. I feel like I get asked so many questions about, like, where do I start with all of that? And so I really appreciate you sharing, because I would argue there are a bunch of places you can start, and it's figuring out, to your point, we all have things back to what we talked about a few minutes ago that I think we're good at and things that maybe we're not as strong at. And it doesn't mean as a leader you can't get better at certain things, or even as a non-leader you can't get better at certain things. But if you are a leader and you have a staff member who has a skill set that you don't have that ties in with your mission, you'd be crazy, obviously, I would argue, not to find a way to empower that person to be able to ultimately, allow them to execute or do something right that has to do with that skill set. So, well, one of the things I admire about you most, Megan, is you're big on just this whole idea of personal, professional growth, helping others. And we've had many conversations, I feel like, over the years about mentors and how important they are. Why is mentorship important to you? I think that's the first thing I'd want to know. And then the second thing would be, how has having the mentors you've had really helped you either personally or professionally in your career so far?
So why is it important? It's important to me because oftentimes I find myself thinking of things only in the context or the way in which I sort of perceive the world or know the world, right? And being able to get a different perspective or a different take on things, I think, is crucial just to helping you see it from a different point of view. It doesn't always mean that perspective is going to solve the problem, but it can help open your mind a little bit to, okay, I hadn't thought about that, or I hadn't considered that viewpoint before, and this is actually really important. We should kind of think through what this means to the team. And so having those people that you can really trust, that you can bounce ideas off of or just get their take on it, I think is really helpful in both growing you as an individual and then ideally your team. What I've learned from mentors and things that I think have been really helpful, the example that I shared earlier of when I first got this director job at Wofford, one of the first phone calls I made was to one of my mentors to say, here's sort of what I'm thinking, but can you give me your feedback? Give me your honest assessment on what I'm missing and what I need to incorporate into sort of this first week or 2 weeks in this role. And she was incredibly helpful in kind of setting me up for success. I think that, again, this is one of those things where I will never be able to repay her for that, right? Like I'll never be able to do anything that's as meaningful to her as that was to me. And so sort of I look at it as a opportunity to do that for other people, right? And I think that when you have a mentor-mentee relationship that's done well, it can be mutually beneficial for both parties. But ultimately, you know, we're all human beings and nobody wants to feel alone in the world. No one wants to feel like they're the first person to ever do something or the only person to do something. And knowing that there are other people that understand the struggles and the complications and that also understand how wonderful the success can be is I think it's a really great thing to kind of have that bonding experience with other people, especially those that you don't work with kind of on a daily basis.
I would tell you, if you're listening to this, a couple of things. If you don't have a mentor or somebody that you feel like you can trust and have those type of conversations Megan just described, please find one. I know, Megan, I've connected, I don't know what number we might be at these days, right? But a number of young emerging leaders or people who think they want to do leadership with you over the years and said, listen, I'm more than happy to allow you to bounce ideas off of me, but I'm well aware there are certain viewpoints and lenses that I don't have that I think are important if this is the path you want to learn more about or the path that you think you want to go down. So obviously I know as much as I hear when it comes to what it means to be a female leader versus a male leader in 2022. If you were talking right now to a group of young female admissions professionals who were like, I think I want to be Megan one day, I think I want to be a VP one day, what would you tell them right now?
Well, if they want to be me, I'd say find a different plan. If they want to be a director or VP, I think I'm going to make the assumption that the why they want that title or that role is coming from a genuine place of aligning with their personal values, goals, values, all of that. Because I do think it's important to note that if your reasoning for wanting a position isn't, for lack of a better word, genuine, you're going to just struggle with everything else, right? I think sometimes people want those positions for the title or whatever they assume comes with it. Wanting it for the right reasons is the first important thing. And so if we make the assumption that that's there, that genuine desire is there, I'll echo what you just said, which is find someone that you can talk to that can give you honest feedback on where you are in your career in terms of your strengths and then in terms of areas where you can most sort of grow and learn. For me personally, I had lots of conversations very early on before I was in this role of how can I best add value to my team in the role that I'm in right now, and trying to do those things really well without the expectation of promotion or raises or whatever you want to put into the picture coming along with that doing that from a genuine place of wanting to be helpful. And then also at the same time starting to tackle the list of, okay, what are all of the things that I'm not so comfortable with? Maybe for some people it's understanding the data side of things or the strategy side of things, or maybe for some it's, I'm not so sure about the leadership component yet. I don't have a ton of experience there. Going through sort of what those things are and then finding ways that you can work on that list. Again, very important, I think, to do this without the expectation that some huge payoff is coming in the end, right? That you're doing this because this makes you better. And I am one of those people that think that when you're planning appropriately and you're working on yourself, the opportunities will come and that ultimately you'll have positioned yourself to be competitive for those opportunities.
Okay, I agree with everything you said, but back to female versus male. Me being a male, I can't answer this question. For any young women listening to this, is there anything additional you would want them to know that you think would be helpful from a female lens?
I think that in my experience, I've been fortunate to work in a place where I have not felt like my opinion wasn't as valid or that it wasn't considered in the same way that other male people in the office's opinions might have been considered or validated. So internally, that has not been something that I have struggled with from my office internally. I think that it is likely that there will be people externally that will make assumptions about you, and for me, I've tried to sort of view a lot of that as, so let me give an example that might be better than me trying to just use a bunch of words. A couple years back, we had a family come in after a tour, and a dad walked in and wanted to speak with someone about our merit scholarship program. And I said, oh, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. And he said, actually, we really just want to talk to that guy over there. And it was the person that had given their session. And I knew it's probably because I'm a woman, and I was standing behind our front desk, and he's probably making the assumption that I'm our receptionist and that I don't know anything about this merit scholarship program. And so I just kind of let it go. And when he went up to talk to the counselor that had given the session, the guy said, oh, actually, Megan runs that scholarship program, and she's the one that you'll want to talk to. And so we had a great conversation, and everything was fine. But certainly those little moments like that can be very frustrating, I think, as a woman, to feel at times that you're not maybe taken as seriously, or that you're questioned some more than maybe others might be. What I've tried to say to myself that I think has been helpful, and that I think could be helpful for other women in general, is that oftentimes when people are making those assumptions, it's important to think of it as, this is communicating more about that individual than it is about me and my skill set, right? That tone, or sort of that approach, really has nothing to do with me as a person, and it has everything to do with that individual and how they're approaching the world. And that's not something that I can fix or change in someone else, right? And so trying to sort of take the feeling part out of it and look at it objectively has been helpful. It doesn't mean that those moments aren't frustrating. It doesn't mean that they don't hurt a little bit. But I think that if you can view it from that lens, you'll be setting yourself up for a little bit less heartache along the way.
I really appreciate you sharing that with us, and I have no doubt it's going to help a number of people listening. I want to go back to data. You hit on that 4 or 5 minutes ago. Talk to me just about when you are in that leadership role. That's the biggest thing I feel like when I'm asked the question from people who want to be in the position you're in. But Jeremy, how is it really different from being a counselor or an assistant director and I would argue everybody I know, not just on the admissions side, but even if you work in enrollment marketing, communications, I think anytime you go up the leadership ladder, you're doing more planning, if we want to call it that, and you're doing more, all right, let's take all this data that we now have access to. So talk to us a little bit about how you do that and what has worked well for you. I would love people, if they're looking for ideas on how do I utilize data better, to maybe, take a couple of things away from you, because I know you're doing a lot of things well.
That I love the data piece of my job. I've always loved looking at trends and patterns and the numbers and sort of what it all looks like and how it all shakes out. The comment that you made of how is that piece of the data different from when you're sort of managing a territory, I would say that when I was managing a territory, all of the data that I looked at centered around what high schools should I be visiting, what areas of my territory are likely going to produce the most applications and therefore have better opportunities for deposits. When you're looking at it from a larger perspective and not from a territory lens, to me, it's more about trying to balance lots of very important but competing priorities, right? And so what does our 4 or 5 year trend look like in this particular section of our applicant pool? What are the factors about our college or the world or where we are that might have changed that particular section of our applicant pool, and how is that going to influence our overall number and what the outcome looks like? And so I think that it's just really taking it from a very focused sort of sense of what data and that analysis looks like to applying it to a much larger view on enrollment and and trying to predict what a 17-year-old student is going to do at the end of the day. Our CRM, I love the CRM that we use, and it has the ability to do really as much as you want to do from a data standpoint. I think you could probably get overwhelmed with how much data we have and what we can do with that. I think that it can also be from a strategy standpoint something where it can be a very clear communicator of this is working well or this isn't working well, right? So trying out, for example, 2 different types of messages to the same group of students and which message has a better open rate or a better response rate. That's where the data can kind of inform some of those daily decisions that you're making. And so it's a lot, I think, that you can easily become overwhelmed with, but what I've tried to focus on is just specific areas at a time, not changing the overall plan all at once, because then you have no idea what did work and what didn't work, but taking sort of small sections of our whole process and looking at how can we improve this, and then what data do we have that backs up that this did improve or didn't improve, and then making the necessary adjustments there.
Yeah, to your point, data, because there's so much of it now, and to your point, the best CRMs have just mounds and mounds of it, can easily become overwhelming, and it can cause you to become back to frustration, stress, growing pains, all of that. I know I hear a lot of that from your peers in the industry. So I love that you said step by step, piece by piece, don't try to do it all. Did you use data a lot when you were a counselor, or was that something that you kind of, until you were more on the senior side, if we want to call it that, really didn't utilize as much because you had other people doing it for you?
I utilized it from the beginning from a standpoint of where should I be investing my time. There are certainly, I think, you sort of know inherently these are schools that we're going to have to visit, but there's always opportunity in a travel schedule to add a little bit more here or to target maybe some new places. And so I used it primarily in that way. As I sort of grew in my different roles here at Wofford, that changed from just identifying a high school that I needed to visit or an area that we should focus on to actually looking at some of the analytics behind the students that we had admitted and who's most likely to enroll, and does my communication with this particular set of students that has a higher likelihood to enroll need to be different. And I don't mean different in terms of the messaging, but maybe those students are getting a handwritten note versus an email or things of that nature. And so as I sort of grew in the field, I think that I tried to use the data to help me narrow down my focus, especially on the activities that were very time intensive, and handwritten notes being probably one of the biggest ones. I do that still, but that was one of the ways that obviously you can't send one to everybody, right? And so being able to kind of use that to narrow down where the focus should be is something that I sort of grew into as I became more comfortable with understanding what the data means, where it comes from, how to get it.
I hear a lot of young admissions counselors ask me, Jeremy, I think I want to do more on the leadership side of things. And they may not say director or VP, but they want to take more of an active leadership role in their office. And it's one of the first things I tell them is, how comfortable are you with data? Because if you're not comfortable with data, you need to get more comfortable, not just if you want to be a director or a VP, But if you want to get more, to your point, out of your own territory, for example, in terms of understanding trends or being able to see, is it worth my time to do X with this group and I should be doing Y with this group instead?
That's right.
We've been ending every podcast, Megan, with a signature question. So I'm going to ask you to give us an important piece of advice that somebody has given you over the years that has really stuck. What would it be?
I would say that what's been most helpful to me is being open to opportunities that might not look like what I have necessarily envisioned for myself. So if you're a very driven person, and I like to think of myself as a driven person, I think it's easy to set an end goal and be very tunnel vision toward that specific goal. The advice that I've gotten in my life is don't be so tunnel vision towards that one specific thing. An opportunity might come along that doesn't look anything at all like what you thought you would be doing, but be open to that because there's lots of value and opportunities for growth in that.
Great advice. Last thing we're going to do is what I call fun rapid fire. So I'm literally just going to give you 4 or 5 things and I just want some quick feedback from you, okay?
Got it. Hit me.
Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Song that you just can't get out of your head right now?
I don't know, Jeremy. That one's tough.
Best vacation spot you've ever been to?
Eleuthera.
How many games are the Pittsburgh Steelers going to win this upcoming season?
All of them. Have to be optimistic.
If they play the Vikings, I'm going to say no on that, but we'll agree to disagree.
We'll go all but one. How about that for compromise?
There we go. Megan, thank you for being a guest today and for sharing so many thoughts and advice.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me, Jeremy. I really appreciate you and everything that you do for higher ed and for admission folks like myself.
And I appreciate all of you for listening. Thank you and have a great rest of your day.
Hey, all, Zach here from Enrollify. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Mission Admissions with Jaime Tears. If you like this episode, do us a huge favor and hit that follow and subscribe button below. Furthermore, if you've got just 2 minutes to spare, we would greatly appreciate you leaving a rating and a review of this show on Apple Podcasts. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, admissions, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks that are all designed to empower you to become a better higher ed professional. But Enrollify is far more than just a podcast network. Enrollify is where higher ed comes to learn new marketing skills, discover new products and services, and find their next job. We're a growing learning community of 4,000 members, and we'd love to welcome you into the fold. You can access our free blog articles, newsletters, e-courses, and more, or purchase our master course on how to market a university with Terry Flannery at enrollify.org. We look forward to meeting you soon and welcoming you into the community. Again, you can subscribe for free at enrollify.org.